Good morning, men and women of the faith. Glad to be back with you with part 2 of this spirit-led teaching, which is having a house naturally, but spiritually homeless. Having a house naturally, but spiritually homeless. There is a crisis in the spirit, and it's homelessness. And just like you have people according to the flesh address homelessness in the flesh, which there's no such thing as homelessness in the flesh. You cannot have a house, but you can't be homeless according to the flesh. You could only not have a house according to the flesh, but you could only be homeless spiritually. You can only be homeless spiritually because the flesh doesn't have a home, because the flesh is eternal. The flesh is temporal. So whatever the flesh is stepping in, or whatever the flesh calls home, is really just a house. It's really just a house. And for the Christian, the house, no matter how grand it is, no matter how beautiful it is, and there's nothing wrong with that, the true Christian knows that the house is the temporary home, because the fruit of the Spirit is there. So the house is home-like according to the fruit of the Spirit, but the man and woman is at home in the Spirit. Okay, divine order has to be restored. Matthew 6:24. Matthew 6:24 says that no man can serve two masters. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and hold to the other, or he will hold to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Mammon is the god of money. You cannot serve God. You cannot serve God and money. You cannot pursue Christ and money. Now, we can have both Christ and money, but we cannot pursue both Christ and money. See, that has to be explained, or else you're going to have a broke mentality and think you're supposed to be broke. No, we can have Christ and money, but you can't pursue both Christ and money. When you're abiding in Christ as a man or woman in the Spirit, this is why through the soul, the body comes under the government of the fruit of the Spirit. Because the natural male and female has to be governed. It has to be governed by faith as Christ leads the man and the woman through the flesh by faith. Because Christianity is life beyond the flesh, because there is no life in the flesh. The flesh was not made to live. It was made to exist. Our spirit was created to live. Okay. Existing and living are two different things. So you cannot serve Christ and money. You can have both Christ and money, but you can't serve both Christ and money. Mark 8:36. For what does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? What does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? Seek first the kingdom of heaven and its righteousness in the Spirit. And all these things in the flesh will follow the first fruits of the Spirit. Once you're back home as a man or woman and you've been eternally reclothed in the first fruit righteousness of home, you are now superior to corruption. Now, what will follow the light of the Spirit is the things that are not eternal. The financial and material provision of the Spirit is going to follow. You see, you can have both Christ and money. You can be in Christ, should I say, and still have money, but you can't serve Christ and money. All right. So let us go to Luke 12:15 through 21. Luke 12:15 through 21. Luke 12:15 through 21. 21 says, no, 15 says, and Jesus said unto the Pharisees, he said, beware of covetousness, for a man's life does not consist in the abundance of things which he possessed. Now that's a man or a woman. He said, there was a certain man. Wait, let me grab this. Okay. He said, the ground of a certain man, of a certain rich man, brought forth plentifully. He had much pertaining to the flesh. And he thought within himself, saying, what shall I do? Because I have no room to bestow my fruits. In 18, he says, this will I do. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there will I bestow all my goods. 19 says, and he said to himself, I will say to my soul, soul, you have much goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. He had much pertaining to the flesh. But God said unto him, you are a fool. This night your soul shall be required of you. Then who shall those things be for which you have treasured up, which you have provided? And if you notice, he never answered, because he couldn't answer. He couldn't answer it. So is he that lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. See, he didn't say it was wrong to have treasure for yourself. The problem is he had treasure for himself, but he wasn't rich toward God. Towards God, he had a house naturally, but he was homeless eternally. And I'm more sure he had the finest of clothes naturally, but he was unclothed eternally. So he was not rich towards God because he was eternally homeless and he was eternally unclothed. So he was in eternal poverty. He was in eternal poverty. So there's a crisis in the spirit. The eternal man and the eternal woman, the spiritual aspect of us that was created for eternity, that fell from Christ, we have to be restored back to Christ. And once we're back in eternity, which is Christ, then we have to be reclothed in eternity, which is the fruit of Christ, which is restoration back to the image of Christ, so that we can once again be reclothed in the fruit of Christ, and be fruitful and multiply. This is what the Lord said to us in the beginning of Genesis: be fruitful and multiply. Okay, let us go to 2 Corinthians 4, 17, 18. 2 Corinthians 4, 17 and 18. 17 says, although our light affliction, which is but for a moment, it passes by, it works for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. An eternal weight of glory. 18, while we look not at the things which are seen. For the things which are seen are temporary. But we look at the things which are not seen. That's with the natural eye. That's eternal. The things which are not seen with the natural eye, we see with our spiritual eyes. For we look not at things which are seen, for the things which are seen are temporary. Like a house, cars, the material things of the world, all the things that money can buy. These things are not evil, but they're temporary. But we look at the things which are not seen, for the things which are not seen are eternal. The things which are not seen with your natural eyes, you see them with your eternal eyes. You focus on eternity. It doesn't mean you don't see what's in the flesh. Eternity going to swallow up the flesh because you're going to be living in the flesh, but by the fruit of the Spirit beyond the flesh. That's called the Christ life. Kingdom living. 2 Corinthians 5:7. This is why we walk by faith, not by sight. This is why we walk by faith, not by sight. Faith is divine insight. If you're in faith, you're in the gospel, you're home. If you're walking by sight, you're outside of the gospel. You're outside of the gospel. You're homeless. You're eternally homeless. Now, you can have a house, but you're spiritually homeless. You're not home. You can be in church, but you're not in Christ. Salvation is in Christ. It's not in church. Church is supposed to point you to Christ. And if you're going to a church that's not pointing you to Christ, you may want to get out of that church. And this brings us to a conclusion of part 2 of this teaching. Be back with you in part 3. Love you with the love of Christ.